Dylan's family had stayed silent for weeks, watching the media swirl around the latest drama like a storm no one could stop. But now the silence is shattered, and what they revealed has sent shockwaves through everyone who thought they already knew the truth. The living room where they sat was heavy with unspoken words until his older sister leaned forward and began to speak, her voice trembling yet steady enough to carry the weight of everything they had been holding in. She said that what the world had seen was only a fragment of a much larger and far more complicated story. She described how Dylan had come home late one night, his eyes tired not from the work, but from something deeper that had drained the light out of him. He sat at the kitchen table staring at his untouched tea while the rest of the family exchanged nervous glances. His father finally asked what was going on, and Dylan simply shook his head. That was the moment his mother knew something in his life had shifted beyond repair. The tension in his shoulders, the quiet in his voice, the way he seemed to be somewhere far away, even as he sat among them. His sister went on to tell how in the days that followed, he would leave before dawn and return long after the stars had faded from the sky. No one knew where he was going, and whenever they tried to ask, he would change the subject. The family began to notice whispers in the neighborhood, strangers pointing and murmuring whenever Dylan passed by. She said that it was like living inside a glass room with the whole world peering in, but never truly seeing what was happening inside. They felt helpless watching him carry a burden that seemed to grow heavier every day. Then came the night that changed everything. His phone rang, and the name that flashed on the screen froze the room. It was someone from his past, someone the family had not heard from in years. Dylan stepped outside to take the call, and the minutes stretched into nearly an hour. When he came back, and his face was pale, his hands clenched, and his breathing uneven. He sat down but did not speak. His mother touched his arm and asked if he was all right. His only answer was a quiet, "I think it's starting." Again. No one knew exactly what that meant, but the fear in his voice said more than words ever could. The family recounted the next morning when reporters camped outside their home. The air was thick with questions and flashing cameras. They could hear the shouts even with the windows shut. His father tried to protect him by telling the press nothing, but Dylan's eyes revealed that whatever was happening was already beyond their control. His younger cousin said she saw him late that night pacing the hallway, whispering into his phone as if trying to convince someone not to do something. She did not hear the full conversation, but caught fragments about promises, betrayals, and something that could ruin everything if it ever came out. His mother finally admitted that she feared for what this would do to him, not just in his career but to his sense of who he was. She said Dylan had always carried a quiet pride in his work. Every role, every project was something he poured himself into, but now it felt like the very thing he loved was turning into a weapon against him. The family agreed that this drama was not just another headline but something that reached deep into their lives and threatened to unravel bonds that had taken years to build. The most haunting moment came when his sister revealed what Dylan told her in private just days ago. He said that the person at the center of this storm was not who everyone thought, that there was another layer to the story, another player whose name had not yet surfaced. He told her that when the truth finally came out, it would not just shock the fans, but would change the way everyone in the industry looked at him forever. She said the way he looked at her then was like someone bracing for a tidal wave they could not stop. As the family spoke, each detail painted a picture of a man standing at the edge of something vast and unstoppable. They did not know if speaking out would help him or hurt him, but they could no longer sit in the shadows while the world made its own story out of fragments and guesses. They wanted people to understand that behind the polished image there was someone fighting battles no one could see, and that the drama consuming the headlines was not just entertainment, but a real struggle pulling apart the threads of his life. What happens next, they said, will depend on who speaks first and who chooses to stay silent. But one thing is certain. The truth that Dylan carries is bigger and more dangerous than anyone realizes, and when it finally surfaces, it will not just be another story in the endless cycle of celebrity news. It will be the moment that changes everything for him and for everyone who thought they knew who Dylan really was. The quiet in the room was so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Dylan's mother sat at the edge of the couch, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had been silent for most of the conversation, letting others speak, but when she finally opened her mouth, the entire room seemed to lean closer. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew steady, like a wave that knows exactly where it is going. She spoke of nights Dylan had not returned home, of whispered calls behind closed doors, of messages that were deleted before anyone could read them. She said the drama the public had seen was only the surface, and that underneath it all were moments far more devastating than any camera had captured. His older brother, who had been sitting near the window, suddenly stood up and began pacing. He said there were things the family had never wanted to make public, secrets they had protected for years, but the weight had become too much. He described the day Dylan came home looking like he had aged years in a matter of hours, his shoulders heavy, as if carrying the entire world. The brother's voice cracked when he spoke of finding Dylan sitting on the floor of his room, staring at nothing, the script for his next project lying untouched on the desk. The family knew then that this was more than just a scandal, it was breaking something deep inside him. The house that day felt colder than usual, even with the afternoon sun spilling through the curtains. Dylan's aunt recalled how the family gathered around the kitchen table, each person trying to come up with a way to shield him from what was coming. But the storm was already too close, too loud, and too relentless. She said they could hear the hum of messages flooding in from his phone in the other room, the sound like a constant reminder that the outside world was not going to let this go. Every ping felt like a strike against the fragile calm they were trying to build. One moment that stood out most vividly was the night Dylan's father walked into his son's room without knocking. He found him sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. No tears, no words, just silence, so heavy it felt alive. The father sat next to him and placed a hand on his shoulder, but Dylan did not move. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, and the words he spoke were ones his father said he would never forget. He said he was tired of being strong for everyone else, tired of smiling when all he wanted was to disappear for a while. It was then his father realized that the public only ever saw the performance, not the exhaustion behind it. Neighbors began to notice changes too. One recalled seeing Dylan walking alone near the old park late at night, wearing a cap pulled low, as if trying to blend into the darkness. He would stop at the same bench each time, sit for a few minutes, and then leave without speaking to anyone. They said it was a haunting sight, as though he was looking for something that he knew he would not find. Even the family admitted they did not always know where he went on those nights, and they feared the silence more than any headline. By the time the news reached its peak, the family had almost stopped reading the articles. They said the words in them felt like knives twisting deeper each time. His younger cousin confessed she avoided school for days because she could not bear to hear the whispers from classmates who thought they knew the truth. She said they did not understand that the story was not just about a celebrity, it was about a person they loved, someone whose laughter used to fill their home, now replaced by long stretches of quiet. When asked what they wanted the public to know, his sister spoke up, her voice clear and steady. She said Dylan was not perfect, but he had always carried the weight of his choices without blaming others. She said the drama people were dissecting online had real consequences, not just for Dylan, but for every member of the family who had to watch him crumble and try to piece himself back together. She wanted people to understand that behind the glamour and the cameras there was a human being who still had to wake up every morning and face a world that seemed determined to misunderstand him. As the conversation went on, it became clear that the family's decision to speak out was not made lightly. They knew their words would spark more questions, more speculation, but they hoped that maybe, just maybe, it would also remind people that compassion was still possible in a world that thrived on tearing others down. They wanted to tell their truth, not for sympathy, but to show that Dylan's story was far from over. They believed he could rise again, even if it meant walking through the fire first. The final words came from his mother, who had been silent again for a long time. She looked directly into the camera and said she believed her son would find his way back, but that it would take time. She asked that people give him that time, to step back and let him heal. And as she spoke, there was a quiet strength in her tone, the kind that comes from someone who has already weathered storms and knows there will be more to come. The room fell silent again after she finished, and in that silence, you could almost feel the weight of everything unsaid.